As I pulled my car up the long, winding driveway, the Blackwood Mansion loomed before me, its Gothic architecture casting an ominous shadow over the dense forest that surrounded it. My heart raced with a mix of apprehension and determination. I was here to babysit Lucas Holloway for the weekend. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and a sense of unease crept up my spine. Still, I pressed on, making my way to the massive oak doors. When the Holloways greeted me, their expressions were harried. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Emily. Lucas is upstairs in his room. The kitchen is stocked, and there's an emergency number by the phone if you need it. We'll be back on Sunday evening." With that, they hurried out the door, leaving me alone in the cavernous foyer, my uneasiness growing. As the Holloways rushed out the door, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. Their hasty exit and the way they had rattled off the instructions left me with more questions than answers. I stood there, listening to the sound of their car engine fading into the distance, and a shiver ran down my spine. "All right, Emily, you've got this," I muttered to myself, trying to muster up some confidence. I made my way up the grand staircase, my footsteps echoing through the eerie silence of the mansion. At the top of the stairs, I found myself standing in front of a heavy oak door, which I assumed led to Lucas's room. I hesitated for a moment, then gently pushed it open. The room was dimly lit, and I could barely make out the outline of a small figure huddled on the bed. "Lucas?" I called out tentatively. "Hi, I'm Emily. Your parents asked me to come and stay with you for the weekend." The boy didn't respond, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I took a few steps closer, and that's when I noticed the haunted look in his eyes. He stared at me, unblinking, his gaze cutting through me like ice. "It's nice to meet you," I tried again, forcing a smile. "I'm here to keep you company, if that's all right with you." Still, no response. The silence was deafening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. As dusk settled over the Blackwood Mansion, a sense of unease crept into my bones. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, gazing out the large, ornate windows, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the towering trees. The shadows seemed to grow longer, casting a sinister pall over the house. Turning my attention back to Lucas, I noticed him sitting motionless on the bed, his eyes fixed on the flickering flames in the fireplace. I approached him cautiously, not wanting to startle the child. "Lucas?" I called out softly, but he didn't acknowledge me. "It's getting a little late. Would you like to help me prepare dinner?" The boy remained silent, his gaze unwavering. I felt a chill run down my spine as I noticed the strange, serene expression on his face. It was as if he was lost in his own world, oblivious to my presence. Undeterred, I moved closer and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Lucas, are you all right?" Suddenly, his head snapped in my direction, and I recoiled at the unsettling intensity of his stare. "They prefer the darkness," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I felt my heart skip a beat. "Who prefers the darkness, Lucas?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "My friends," he replied, his gaze returning to the dancing flames. "They don't like the light." A shiver ran through me as the room seemed to grow colder. I tried to push away the uneasy feeling, telling myself that I was simply overthinking things. As the night wore on, I tried my best to ignore the strange occurrences that had unsettled me throughout the day. Yet, I couldn't help but notice the way Lucas's toys would inexplicably move on their own, as if touched by invisible hands. I watched, transfixed, as a wooden block slid across the floor, seemingly of its own accord. Shaking my head, I convinced myself that it was merely a trick of the light or a draft causing the movement. Later, as I prepared for bed, I thought I heard faint whispers echoing through the halls. I paused, straining to listen, but the sound had already faded, leaving me to wonder if I had imagined it. Surely, it was just my mind playing tricks on me, amplifying every little noise. Dismissing the unease that had been steadily building, I turned out the lights and settled into the plush bed, determined to get a good night's rest. As I drifted off, I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched, but I pushed the thought away, telling myself that I was simply being paranoid. As I lay in the massive bed, the weight of the day's events weighing heavily on my mind, the shrill ring of the landline phone jolted me awake. My heart pounding, I fumbled for the receiver, answering with a trembling hello. The line crackled with static, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, the sound of heavy breathing filled my ear, sending a chill down my spine. I gripped the receiver tighter, my knuckles turning white, as I strained to make out any discernible words. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to mask the fear in my voice. "If this is some kind of prank, it's not funny." The only response was the eerie, labored breathing, growing louder and more erratic. I felt my stomach twist in knots, my mind racing with possibilities of who or what could be on the other end of the line. Suddenly, a soft whimper reached my ears, and my blood ran cold. "Lucas?" I whispered, the realization dawning on me. "Is that you?" The line went dead, leaving me in a deafening silence. Clutching the receiver, I slowly turned to face the empty room, a growing sense of dread settling in the pit of my stomach. Shaking off my fear, I hurried to Lucas's room, only to find him sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide and unblinking. "My friends prefer the darkness," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt the color drain from my face as a new wave of unease washed over me. The eerie phone call and Lucas's unsettling words played on a loop in my thoughts, leaving me feeling on edge and filled with a growing sense of dread. Tossing and turning, I tried to push the disturbing occurrences out of my mind, but it was impossible. Every creak of the old floorboards sent my heart racing, and I found myself jumping at the slightest sound. I flicked on the bedside lamp, the warm glow providing a small measure of comfort. I stared up at the ornate ceiling, tracing the intricate patterns with my eyes, desperately seeking a distraction from the unease that had taken hold of me. But the peace was short-lived, as a sudden chill swept through the room and the lamp flickered ominously. I pulled the blankets tighter around myself, my teeth chattering as the temperature seemed to plummet. A sense of dread crept up my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Cautiously, I scanned the room, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Exhaustion eventually claimed me, but even in sleep, the horrors of the day refused to relinquish their hold. Troubled dreams plagued me, filled with shadows and whispers, leaving me restless and unrefreshed when I finally awoke. As I stepped into the dimly lit hallway, my heart pounded against my chest. The eerie stillness of the manor was unnerving, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Clutching the flashlight tightly, I made my way towards the living room, determined to convince myself that my earlier experiences were simply a product of an overactive imagination. However, as I rounded the corner, a sight that defied all logic and reason made my blood run cold. Lucas's toys were floating in midair, suspended as if by an invisible force. I blinked, unsure if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the levitating objects remained, their movements almost ominous. "What?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Suddenly, a chilling sound pierced the silence, a disembodied voice, whispering indistinctly, as if from a great distance. I whirled around, the beam of my flashlight sweeping the room, but I saw nothing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a shiver ran down my spine. I approached the floating toys, reaching out a tentative hand. As my fingers brushed against one of the dolls, it abruptly dropped to the floor, the impact echoing through the room. I recoiled, heart pounding, and backed away, my mind racing to make sense of the inexplicable phenomenon. Determined to uncover the truth, I ventured deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the Blackwood Mansion, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air seemed to grow colder the further I went, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Finally, I stumbled upon a set of double doors that had been partially obscured by a heavy curtain. Curiosity getting the better of me, I carefully pushed them open, revealing a room unlike any other in the mansion. The walls were adorned with disturbing symbols, their meaning a mystery to me. Dusty tomes and ancient-looking artifacts lined the shelves. Had the hallways been involved in some kind of occult practices? The very thought sent a shiver down my spine. I tried the front door once more, my fingers gripping the handle with desperation. But it refused to budge, as if an unseen force had sealed it shut. The windows met the same fate, the glass impenetrable despite my frantic efforts. No, 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 I muttered, panic rising in my chest. I was trapped, with no means of escape. Whirling around, I found Lucas staring at me, his large eyes unblinking. Why won't the doors open? I demanded, my voice laced with fear. They don't want us to leave, he said simply, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. I shook my head in disbelief. What do you mean, they? Who are they? Lucas remained silent, his gaze unwavering. The air grew thick with tension, and I felt the weight of the house pressing down on me, as if it were alive and intent on keeping us prisoner. Realization dawned on me, and a cold chill ran down my spine. The house, it's trapping us here, isn't it? Lucas nodded, a sinister edge to his expression. The house doesn't like it when people try to leave. I stared at Lucas, my mind racing with questions and fear. The house had trapped us here, and I was determined to get to the bottom of this twisted mystery. Lucas, what is going on? I demanded, my voice trembling slightly. Why is the house doing this? What is it that you're not telling me? The boy's expression remained alarmingly calm, as if he was completely unfazed by the terrifying situation we found ourselves in. The house doesn't like it when people try to leave, he repeated, his tone eerily matter-of-fact. But why? I pressed, my desperation growing. What is the reason for all this? Lucas hesitated, his eyes flicking away from mine. There's an old presence here. One that's been here for a very long time. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of presence? What are you talking about? Something dark, Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something that feeds on the fear and suffering of those who come here. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to process this information. And this presence, it's the reason the house won't let us leave? Lucas nodded, a shadow of fear crossing his face. It wants to keep us here, to be part of its collection. I swallowed hard, the realization of our dire situation sinking in. So, what do we do? How do we escape this? Lucas shook his head solemnly. There is no escape. The house is always watching, always waiting. Once it has you in its grasp, it never lets go. His words sent a chill through me, and I knew then that we were trapped. As Lucas' disturbing words sank in, a sense of dread gripped me. I needed more answers, a deeper understanding of the malevolent presence that had ensnared us in this nightmare. Lucas, please, I pleaded, my voice tinged with desperation. Tell me more about this dark force, this presence you mentioned. What is its history here? The young boy's gaze darkened, and I could see the weight of the knowledge he carried. The Blackwood Mansion has always been cursed, he began, his words heavy with sorrow. It was built upon the site of an ancient ritual. I listened, my breath caught in my throat. Generations ago, a coven of occultists had acquired the land, conducting secretive ceremonies to harness the energies of the land. Their actions had awakened a malevolent entity, one that now lingered within the very walls of the house. The entity, it's like a parasite, Lucas continued, his eyes downcast. It feeds on the fear and suffering of those who enter the mansion. And it will stop at nothing to keep its victims trapped here, forever. I felt a cold grip around my heart as the gravity of our situation became clear. What about the hallways? I asked, desperately seeking some glimmer of hope. Surely they must know about this. Lucas shook his head solemnly. The hallways are servants of the entity. They've been tasked with maintaining the house and ensuring that no one escapes its grasp. I felt my stomach twist with dread. I feared that our chances of escape were dwindling by the minute. Determined to find any clues that could aid our escape, I began scouring the house. Heart raced as I spotted an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Carefully, I opened the weathered cover, my fingers trembling. The first entry was dated decades ago, written in a shaky but meticulous hand. As I read, a chill ran down my spine. The entity grows stronger with each passing day, the entry began. I can feel its presence, seeping into the very foundations of this cursed house. The children, the poor children, they're drawn to the entity, as if it calls to them. I've tried to protect them, but the house won't let me interfere. It's as if the very walls are alive, thwarting my every effort. The final entry sent a shiver through me. I can no longer fight the darkness. I am but a shadow, doomed to forever serve its wretched will. Bile rose in my throat as the gravity of the situation sank in. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. Instinctively, I reached for Lucas's hand, but grasped only empty space. Panic seized me as I realized he had vanished. Lucas? I called out, my voice trembling. Lucas, where are you? The only response was the eerie whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls, taunting me. I spun around, my eyes darting frantically, but the hallway had transformed into a disorienting maze of twisting corridors and distorted doors. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and contorting like a mirage. As it drew closer, I felt a scream catch in my throat. It was Lucas, but his features were twisted and unnatural, his eyes black pits of malevolence. We're trapped, Emily, he hissed, his voice echoing unnaturally. There's no escape. I stumbled backward, my back pressed against the wall as the distorted Lucas advanced, his movements jerking and unnatural. The air crackled with an unseen energy, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and bend around me. Desperately, I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the horrific vision before me. But when I opened them, the hallway had transformed once more, the walls now adorned with nightmarish symbols and the floor covered in a swirling, inky blackness. The mansion had enveloped me in a sea of illusions, and I had no idea how to escape its relentless grip. I felt my grip on reality slipping further with each passing moment. Disoriented and exhausted, I stumbled through the ever-shifting corridors, desperately searching for any sign of Lucas. Lucas! I cried out, my voice echoing with a desperate edge. Where are you? The only response was the eerie, disembodied whispers that surrounded me, taunting and tormenting. I pressed on, ignoring the way the floor seemed to shift beneath my feet, the world around me blurring and distorting. As I rounded a corner, I caught a glimpse of a small figure in the distance. Hope flaring in my chest, I hurried forward, only to be met with the twisted, inhuman face of the child. Lucas's features were warped and unnatural, his eyes black pits of malevolence. You can't escape, Emily, he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. The house won't let you go. I stumbled backward. Sinking to my knees, I felt tears of desperation stream down my face. Staring into the twisted, inhuman face of Lucas, I felt the last vestiges of my hope slipping away. Gritting my teeth, I pushed myself to my feet, my mind racing. There had to be a way to escape this nightmare, to free myself and Lucas from the mansion's grasp. Glancing around, my eyes landed on a fireplace, its embers still glowing faintly. An idea began to take shape, fueled by desperation and the instinct for survival. I hurried to the fireplace, grabbing a poker and stirring the coals, coaxing them back to life. The flames flickered and danced, and I felt a surge of determination. "If this house won't let me leave," I muttered, my voice low and resolute, "then I'll burn it to the ground." With a newfound purpose, I began to systematically set the mansion ablaze, methodically spreading the flames through the corridors. The crackle of the fire and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air, and I watched with a grim satisfaction as the S-walls began to blacken and crumble. Lucas's distorted laughter echoed through the halls. If this was the only way to escape the mansion's clutches, then so be it. I would purge this evil, even if it was the last thing I ever did. As the fire consumed the mansion, I steeled myself, prepared to face whatever horrors lay in wait. The flames roared around me, the heat searing my skin, but I refused to back down. My eyes were fixed on Lucas, his twisted features illuminated by the dancing orange glow. The child's laughter echoed through the collapsing halls, sending chills down my spine. "You can't stop it, Emily," he taunted, his voice distorted and inhuman. "The house will never burn. It will stand forever." I gripped the poker tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Then I'll make sure you never terrorize another soul again," I growled, my resolve hardening. Lucas's grin widened, his eyes glinting with malevolence. "You fool, don't you see? I am not the victim here." My heart sank as the realization dawned on me. You're not a child at all, are you?" Lucas's form began to warp and twist, his features elongating and distorting until a horrific, otherworldly creature stood before me. "I am the darkness that has consumed countless souls before you, and I will continue to do so for eternity." I stumbled back, the poker slipping from my grasp as the creature advanced. "No, this can't be happening. I won't let you win." The creature let out a bone-chilling laugh. "It's already too late. The mansion will never be destroyed, and you will be forever trapped within its walls." The flames roared around me, the heat scorching my skin as I watched in horror. "No, this can't be," I cried. The house should be crumbling, reduced to ashes. Lucas, or the entity that had taken his form, let out a bone-chilling laugh, his twisted features illuminated by the dancing flames. "You foolish girl, did you really think you could destroy what has endured for centuries?" he taunted, his voice dripping with malevolence. "This house is indestructible." I stared in disbelief as the fire raged on, the mansion remaining untouched, its intricate spires and Gothic architecture unaffected by the blaze. It was as if the house itself was consuming the flames, drawing power from the very essence of the destruction. "How is this possible?" I whispered, my mind reeling with the implications. Lucas's twisted grin widened, his eyes glinting with a malicious triumph. "It cannot be destroyed, for it is the very embodiment of the evil that has taken root here." Despite my desperate attempts to purge the evil that had consumed this place, the house remained standing, unfazed by the raging inferno. Lucas stood before me, his twisted features twisted into a triumphant grin. The Blackwood Mansion had claimed me as its own, and there was no escape. As the flames began to subside, leaving the house unscathed, a new figure emerged from the shadows. A young woman, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, approached the mansion, drawn by its deceptive allure. "No, don't!" I cried, my voice hoarse with the strain of the battle. "Turn back, before it's too late." But my words fell on deaf ears. The woman continued forward, captivated by the houses. I watched in despair as the woman crossed the threshold, the doors slamming shut behind her. Don't do it, I pleaded, my voice echoing through the shadows, but my words fell on deaf ears. I cursed my own helplessness, my inability to warn the caretaker or to break free from the mansion's hold. The cycle continued, and I could do nothing but watch in despair as the Blackwood Mansion claimed yet another victim. My voice was but a whisper, lost amidst the eerie silence that permeated the air. I watched, helpless, as the caretaker's steps grew more determined, their curiosity overriding any sense of trepidation. Trapped within the confines of this cursed house, I could only watch in despair as the caretaker's journey mirrored my own. The new caretaker, a young woman named Eva, stepped through the imposing doors of Blackwood Mansion. "Hello," she called out, her voice sounding small and uncertain in the vast, silent space. "Is anyone here?" The only response was the faint creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. Sarah's brow furrowed as she took in the detailed carvings and intricate tapestries that lined the walls. As she climbed the grand staircase, the oppressive silence seemed to press in on her, and she couldn't help but feel that the very walls were alive, pulsing with a malevolent presence. The doors to the upper level suddenly swung open of their own accord, as if beckoning her forward. Sarah hesitated, her hand gripping the ornate banister, torn between her curiosity and the growing sense of dread that threatened to consume her. "What am I doing here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I followed behind her, my translucent form passing through the ornate furnishings, desperate to guide her to safety. But the mansion refused to relinquish its grip. The doors swung open of their own accord, drawing Sarah deeper into the labyrinth of horrors. I remembered the fear that had gripped me, the sense of dread that had consumed my every waking moment. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls, a cacophony of voices that had been silenced over the years. I joined them, my own anguished cries mingling with theirs, a symphony of terror that would forever haunt this cursed place. I couldn't escape, couldn't warn them. I could only watch in despair as the cycle repeated. "We are Stay Evil's prisoners forever,"